Brethren Voices, in July 2018, ventured to Cincinnati, Ohio to get the stories of folks attending the annual conference of the Church of the Brethren. On the list of activities was the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which lies on the banks of the Ohio River. Within its walls is 158,000 square feet of a structure dedicated to telling the story of millions of slaves who were brought to this country from Africa. Some early Southern Ohio Brethren were familiar with the Underground Railroad as they helped to hide slaves who were seeking freedom. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. We are reminded of the great diversity of America and the journey that its people have taken. It's a large patchwork, a quilt of many different square blocks that have come together. And talking about quilts, we'll also meet with Tara Bidwell Hornbacker of the Association of the Arts. That's the group that puts together wonderful works of art at the annual Quilting Bee and Auction, which takes place following the business sessions of the annual conference. Thank you for joining us for these two stories in this edition of Brethren Voices. After 10 years of planning, fundraising, and construction, the Underground Railroad Freedom Center opened to the public on August of 2004. 3 pavilions celebrate courage, cooperation, and perseverance. Walter Blackburn, one of its primary architects, before his death, said that the building's undulating quality expresses the fields and the river that escaping slaves crossed to reach freedom. Its curving architecture reflects the winding river and the oft-changing path to freedom. The center's principal artifact is a 21 by 30 foot, 2-story log slave pen built in 1830. The slave jail was moved from a farm in Mason County, Kentucky, where a tobacco barn had been built around it. Captain John W. Anderson, a veteran of the Revolutionary War and slave trader, was the original owner. Slave pens like this were used to hold slaves prior to being sold. Slaves from the area were transported from Dover, Kentucky to slave markets in Natchez, Mississippi and New Orleans, Louisiana. Slaves were held in pens like this for a few days or several months, as Anderson and other slave traders waited for favorable market conditions and higher selling prices. Carl Westmoreland, the curator and senior advisor to the museum, said that the pen is powerful. It has a feeling of hallowed ground. When people stand inside, they often speak in whispers. It is a sacred place. It is here to tell a story, the uncomfortable story of internal American slave trade for future generations. Westmoreland spent 3.5 years uncovering the story of the slave jail. Its authentication by him and other historians is considered a landmark in the material culture of slavery.
Okay, so this is the slave pen. It was owned by John W. Anderson and built in 1834. And it would have held up to about 50 to about 60 enslaved people in here. Now, John W. Anderson, he was all about money. And so he would have said about 20 to 30 people in here because he would have gotten a substantial tax break. Now, this building wasn't necessarily a quarters. Some associate it to a slave quarters that you would find on a plantation. This was part of the internal slave trade and would have been a holding place, intermediate almost. And it would have been John W. Anderson going to these northern parts of Kentucky or even into Ohio, where some of the slaveholders there would have sold some of the enslaved people to him, and he would have kept them here. Or he could have even gone to county jails and got some people who may have ran away from their past owner, and he would have brought them here, and he would have paid a pretty decent price. And here, the women and children were kept on the bottom floor here. It was completely dirt here. So, and there's also a fireplace over here. You can still see some of the stones here are a little bit original. And this is where the women would cook for the entire estate. And over here is the actual door, and it's only one way in, one way out. And the men would have been, anyone above the age of 12 would have been kept up here. This was the entire second floor, and they would have been chained in. So these hooks right here, this is one of the big reasons how we know that this building is authentic. And there would have been a long chain going through each one of these hooks, and there would have been ankle shackles, which are right here, looped in to this long chain, just like this. And they would have been confined to about a space about this big. So not a whole lot of movement, and could have been kept up there for about 4 to 6 months. And you know, one of the main questions I get about this is, so how did they use the restroom? And so the women and children would have been, you know, they could have been off in the corner, and they could have gone to the corner to use the restroom. But the men, they would have had to pass around a pot, simply because they couldn't move around like that. And another question I always get is, why were they chained up, only the men? That was because there's a big scale fear that these men were going to rebel. There's also a bit of a fear of escaping, but it was usually because they were going to revolt. Even John W. Anderson's past owner, he had learned a lot from. He had learned that, they can rebel because even his own slaves had actually rebelled against him and had actually killed him. John W. Anderson was also a large horse fanatic. He liked racing horses. What we're lucky about John W. Anderson is he actually passed away on a horse accident. This time not for pleasure, but this time he was actually running away. He was actually trying to catch a freedom seeker, a runaway, and he fell off his horse and snapped his neck. And if you actually go over here, this wall right here, there are a list of names. And these are names of probate of all of the people that lived here that when he passed away. They went to the courts because he had 5 daughters, and at this point in time, women could not own land or any property, and went to his oldest daughter, Elizabeth, who eventually married. So this place is, it was a holder, but not only was it a holder, but like 2 to 3 times a year, he would take everyone out of here onto a 750-mile walk, 37 to 40 days down to Natchez, Mississippi, to the second largest auction block called Forks on the Road, which sold about 300,000 people before it was liberated in 1862. And it was the second largest auction block in the United States. He could have sold them to a flatboat in Dover, which would have taken about 4 months for them to travel down, but then he could have returned back here and continued on to his business. John W. Anderson was, once again, all about the money. He could have made about $800,000 in today's money every year.
So blue, shades of green, death of death, things unseen, pen with ink, pages wide, faithful test by fireside. And am I alone in the mysterious the seeds of doubt planted in my mind. Make me a heart of gold, make me white as snow. And the shadows and their countrymen gladly take me by the hand. They'll tell me where to go through the darkest of my soul.
If you are a fan of quilting or you know someone who has made one of these works of art and comfort, all you have to do is follow a row of stitches up and over a few blocks, and you'll run into Tara Bidwell Hornbacker and the volunteers for the Association of the Arts. The quilt making and quilt sale of the Church of the Brethren annual conference is a delightful event held each year to raise money for hunger relief projects. We learn that congregations and individuals submit their blocks of their own design to be sewn into these amazing quilted wall hangings and then auctioned off. We met with Tara at the 2018 Church of the Brethren annual conference held in Cincinnati, and we asked her about this amazing, wonderful annual event. Tara Hornbacker, thank you for being with us on Brethren Voices.
My pleasure.
I understand you are one of the coordinators for the quilting
Right.
at the Church of the Brethren annual conference, along with Margaret and Janet.
Yes.
Can you explain what you do?
Well, we are the coordinators for the Association for the Arts. Margaret Waybright and Janet Ryman and I have been coordinators for the Association for the Arts for several years. And for years, when the Association for the Arts first started in the 1970s, part of what we did was distribute worship materials and encourage liturgy and the use of the arts in worship, as well as do the quilting here at conference.
This is for the Church of the Brethren?
For the Church of the Brethren. And so right now what we do is we only auction off quilts that we have quilted here at conference.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I thought the churches were sending the quilts in.
What they do is they send us the blocks, an 8.5 by 8.5 block. We put those tops together that you see in northern Indiana, like in June usually. We put the tops together. Then when we come to annual conference, we put them in the quilt frames with the bottom and then the interior, which is like a polyester batting. Now some people would use cotton, some people use other things. We use a polyester fluff for the inside. And then we put the tops on. We clamp them down and quilt them all here. We don't put them, we used to do everything here. We used to get the blocks, put them together, you know, with the sashing and everything here at conference. Well, that was when conference was a lot longer. When conference is now in this shorter format, we need to put the tops together beforehand.
So how do you get people or the churches to send you the squares?
We beg.
Oh, you,
We have a flyer, a PDF flyer that goes out with the annual conference materials. We also print up that flyer and have copies of it here when we're at annual conference to distribute to people that has what we're doing and then pictures of what the final quilts are, the instructions on how to put them together, what to do, what to avoid, and so that then the churches can send us those quilt blocks. And we need 8.5 by 8.5 quilt squares, and we ask them to identify their congregation and their district if they can.
on the square?
On the quilt square, so that they either embroider them on, or sometimes they use all kinds of innovative ways of identifying their block.
How many churches contribute to the sending the blocks?
It depends on the year. Sometimes we have 120 and sometimes we have, it's been a long time since we've had more than 130 blocks. It would be wonderful if every church in the entire denomination would send us a block. And that way we could make more quilts and also give away more money.
How many, well, if you get 120 blocks, how many quilts is that?
Usually there are 12 to 15 blocks in a wall hanging, but you saw you all see on the video that there are large full-size quilts, and those would take in and of themselves 70 to 80 blocks.
Yeah.
And so that's why we make the smaller wall hangings now rather than the full-size or queen-size quilts.
Okay.
We don't get enough squares to do those
Okay,
larger
I was
ones.
wondering, because a full-size quilt with 2 of those and you're done, huh?
Yes, yes.
How many women are working at the conference to put together the
My
wall
goodness. We switch out all the time. There are persons that every year we depend on coming and quilting. We have women there that come back every day, the entire time of conference, spend the whole day and most of the evening quilting the whole time.
Wow.
But then we have some people that come by and put in 3 or 4 stitches. And everyone who comes in, we give them a little sticker that's about this size that says, I quilted at conference.
Oh, very good.
I don't have my sticker yet, but I've quilted at conference.
Well, it sounds like that's really essential, but putting together things at home before you get here, how many churches are working on that one?
4 churches, women from 4 different churches get together to put them together. And usually we have 6 machines, 6 sewing machines going at once. Wow. We meet at Bethany Church of the Brethren in northern Indiana and put those tops together. And it usually takes us 2 to 3 days to get all the tops together. It's time consuming to make sure everything is right. There's quite a process to it. And Janet and Margaret have been doing this for a long time, and we follow their instructions.
I'm sorry to say I don't know much about quilting, but the tops is really the frame around which the blocks, the smaller blocks go.
Well, the tops are the actual blocks that are put together, because you have the backing, and the backing is one piece of fabric, and then you have the batting, and that's the fluffy stuff in between, and then you have the tops that you put on.
So the tops are what you do ahead of time?
Yes.
With all the squares. So the squares and the tops are all brought here, and then you're joining the batting.
Then I'm making the sandwich with the back, the batting, and the top.
Okay. Wow. If I can remember that, I have learned something today.
Well, and the thing is, we have these old-fashioned quilt frames that are difficult to manage, and it usually takes us an hour to get those silly quilts in those frames for some reason. And I've been doing this for years, and every time we're trying to figure out a better way to do this faster, but for some reason we simply can't.
Do you ever have men come by and do a few
Oh,
stitches?
absolutely.
So men are allowed in the...
Oh, not only allowed, encouraged. We have one quilter who actually quilts at home too, a pastor, Jeff Fackler, just wonderful guy, comes every year and helps us out. Last 2 years his church has chosen to send him as their delegate, so we don't get as much Jeff time as we need.
Because he's in the big meeting.
He's in the big meeting.
So this year, how many quilts will you end up auctioning off?
We will have 8 pieces to auction off. I have one huge full-size quilt from 1985 that came back, and that came from Dick and Margaret Whitmer, and it's a beautiful big blue quilt, and that came back. It's going to be auctioned off, and the proceeds from that will go specifically to Brethren Disaster Response. Now, most of our quilts are given for hunger causes, but we figure we have to feed those people that do the Brethren Disaster Response too, so, it's still for hunger. And then we also have a quilt that was returned from 2004. That's a large size quilt. I have a quilt that was returned from last year from the Mutual Aid Society. They buy quilts and donate them back and buy them again, and so we have one from them from last year, and then I have 5 new pieces. So that's 8 altogether.
How much do you raise for?
It depends. There have been some years when we've barely raised enough to give away a couple $1,000s over our expenses. Now, there have also been years when we have raised $27,000, $30,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it just depends on the year and how generous people can be.
So, and your auction is actually going to be on Saturday?
Yes, Saturday afternoon. It's always at the rise of business. When business is over on Saturday afternoon, quilt auction, and it's loads of fun. It's just absolutely loads of fun.
And you usually get pretty good attendance.
Oh yeah, people line up, and people try and get there early so they can have a chair. And then we have characters that do just character auctioneers. Just have the best time, laugh, and just have the best time doing it.
One time I went to the auction, it was standing room only.
Oh yes, absolutely,
is
every year.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And giggle, oh my goodness. And last year was the first year. I always threaten this. Say, well, if you bid on this quilt, and you buy this quilt, I'll come to your church and preach. Or I won't come to your church and preach if you buy this. You choose. Last year was the first year anyone took me up on it, so I was out at Antioch doing their homecoming.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
And you've been doing this for a lot of years.
I've been active with the Association for the Arts since 1989.
I won't count.
Do the math.
I can do the math.
Almost next year will be 30 years.
Yeah, wonderful. And you don't grow tired, or you don't feel like
no, it's totally fun.
Okay. Are you recruiting people in churches?
Every year we ask, if you'd like to come and join us, put these things together. Every year, please come and quilt. Every year, please send us your quilt blocks.
Well, one of the ladies in our church in Portland, Oregon, is a really big quilter, but she passed away this year. But see, I'm hoping that on this program we can promote that. For instance, men coming, and you'll show them how to stitch.
Oh, absolutely. We teach everybody. We had a whole cadre of kids that would come by and learn to quilt. And it's a joy. One of the students who had graduated from Bethany Theological Seminary, I'd had the mom as a student, and we were very close. Their youngest child, we just taught their youngest child to quilt.
Wow.
So it's generational.
The most I've ever done, or the closest I've gotten to quilting, is that the lady who passed away, her name was Laura Sewell, she had some people in the church who hadn't any experience with quilting, cutting squares. And I don't remember what the size was, but I had
a mat and a rotary cutter.
Yeah, I did. And some is the mat the thing that goes under there,
yes,
so you don't
yes.
scratch up your table?
Yes, and be very careful with your fingers.
Yeah. So I did that. I actually thought, wow, this is something I never
Precision work.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and because you have to be consistent, or
or the quilt will come out squee-jawed.
Squee-jawed?
Squee-jawed.
Oh. Well, fascinating. Well, I'm hoping things go well this year. I hope you make
Me too.
30,000 or more.
I'm just pleased to serve the church in this way, and people get such joy out of it. It's a joyous time when we have the auction, and they're generous and they give because they know you're not buying a quilt, you're giving to alleviate hunger in the world, and that's such a joy.
And they're products of love, and you're sharing love. We have some video of the process over there. I'm kind of wondering how long the whole process takes per wall hanging. So
to estimate the hours?
Yeah.
Well, I can put an 8.5 by 8.5 simple block together in about 3 hours. But that's...
Now 8.5, is that 8 feet by...
No, 8.5, a simple square would take at least that long. Oh. And most people put in days on just
one square.
One square.
Oh my goodness.
Particularly if there's embroidery on that, some people work for months on one square.
I had no idea.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And then to actually assemble the quilts, it takes I would say we had 10 women working for 3 days to assemble the quilts. And then here, I cannot tell you how the numbers of people we have working on those quilts we usually have them in, people can usually start quilting by Tuesday night. Nobody else is in the exhibit area, but our folks can, they'll let our folks in to quilt. So I always plan on having at least one quilt in on Tuesday night, most quilts in by Wednesday noon when we open for annual conference. And anybody can come by at any point, either learn to quilt or just relax and quilt. Because if you, just the rhythmic quilting, it's so relaxing. And some annual conferences, we need a relaxing activity.
Well, my wife knits, and she swears that knitting helps her concentrate.
Oh yes. So. I always have something that I'm working on. And for several years, ever since the Nigerian crisis several years ago, what we've been doing is, what we say is, all of our profits, the proceeds from this auction, go to the Nigeria crisis. Because when we became aware of not just the immediate need, but what was going to be a long-term need for our sisters and brothers in EYN in Nigeria. You know, when it first came out and the Chibok girls were kidnapped, there was a lot of interest.
Yeah.
But interest wanes.
Yeah, it does.
As the further we get from the disaster, from the terrible things that happen, people forget. When we heard the reports from Nigeria and we've listened to our Nigerian sisters and brothers, what we know is that it will take 10 years to even get back to any kind of normal at all. And so we need to be able to support them long term, not just, give one gift, but we need long-term support for EYN and our sisters and brothers in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So we are committed to gifting as long as we can, as much as we can, to the Nigeria crisis.
Taylor Hornbacker, thanks for being with us and
Thank
Brethren
you.
Voices and explaining about the quilting project.
My pleasure
And the
indeed.
wonderful things that people are doing all around the country to contribute to it.
Blessings to you and Brethren Voices.
Well, thank you very much. Today's edition of Brethren Voices is being filmed in Vancouver, Washington, because our studio is still closed for filming. And I'm standing in front of a redwood tree that was transplanted 42 years ago from a seedling about this big, purchased in the redwood forest of Northern California. It's about this big around now and several hundred feet tall. In 2018, over $7,000 was raised for hunger projects. We congratulate the fine work of the Association of the Arts for their efforts. It's been a year of hardship for so many folks around this country and around the world. Stay safe, lend a hand, and smile and help those in need. And thank you for being with us on Brethren Voices. This is Brent Carlson, wishing you peace.
I'll build my nest in sweet apple tree. I hope you'll come by soon and sing with me. We talk about our troubles, we don't hit. We talk about our troubles, we don't hit. We don't throw stones, swing sticks, or even spit. We talk about our troubles, we don't hit. I'm as free a little bird as I can be. I'm as free a little bird as I can be. I build my nest in sweet apple tree. I hope you'll come by soon and sing with me. About the way I make you feel. I care about the way I make you feel. Oh, the hurting things we say take a long time to heal. So I care about the way I make you feel. I'm as free a little bird as I can be. I'm as free a little bird as I can be. I build my nest in sweet apple tree. I hope you'll come by soon and sing with me. I build my nest in a sweet apple tree. I hope you'll come by soon and sing with me.